Our guest, Steven Sachs, founded Bitforms Gallery back in 2011 when 2001, sorry. Wow, that's right. More than 2 decades. When digital art was more than just a curious experiment than the powerhouse it is today. You could say he saw the future before most of us even saw the loading bar. His gallery has been at the forefront of showcasing some of the biggest names in new media art, whose work you've probably seen featured everywhere from the MoMA to the Tate Modern. Steven's been written about in the New York Times, Ad Age, and probably any major art publication you can think of. He even launched one of the first gallery platforms for NFT art before everyone's cousin got onto it. So tonight we're going to talk about his journey, his vision for the future of digital art, and how he's managed to stay ahead of the curve for over 20 years. Everyone, please welcome our guest tonight, Steven Sachs.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Steven, so great to have you here tonight. You know, we met through a mutual friend maybe a week and a half ago.
Yes.
We talked on the phone for like 20 minutes, or it was supposed to be 20 minutes, turned into like an hour. And I was like, dude, this is amazing. I would love to invite you into the community, learn more about your story, and really just share your story with so many of us. Because for those who don't know, Bitforms Gallery has been at the forefront of new media art, which for so many of us, we take for granted. That I'm holding in my hand a giant iPod, which then became an iPhone, which now is an iPad. And we are, using AI to do everything from making art to doing our homework. But you started at this in 2001. Mm-hmm. You were one of the early pioneers. Before we go into the beginning of Bitforms Gallery, I really want to take a step back and talk about how you yourself began your journey as a creative. Maybe even tell us a little bit about your childhood and where you got started and when and where did you get that first creative itch to explore art and even art and technology?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for that. I am actually a third generation Brooklynite. So I
shout out Brooklyn.
Rare breed. And my family, actually my grandparents started an antique shop in Brooklyn, near Coney Island. And then my father took over. So I was always surrounded by art, obviously the opposite, of course, of what I'm doing now, but it did instill in me a very sincere appreciation and understanding of how art impacts your life, but also how art can be a business, because my father was an antique dealer and he made money, but also was surrounding us with beautiful objects. So that was certainly something that, whether I knew it or not, was affecting me when I was growing up. And I worked with him, but again, it wasn't totally my type of art or style of art that I liked, but I there was something that I respected and loved in that idea of being around these inspirational objects and also being able to actually earn a living from selling these objects. So that always probably stuck with me as I proceeded to do other things.
That's awesome. Tell us a little bit about the antique store. Were you like the little kid running around breaking these extremely expensive clocks?
Maybe a little bit, but no, it was, it wasn't what you would typically think of, because he was selling mostly to other dealers and collectors. It wasn't like this beautiful storefront you walked in. It was like cluttered and had all these strange objects and a lot of interesting people coming in. But he would then sell these objects around the world. So yeah, it was this kind. Yeah, it's kind of like the bull in the china shop thing. You did have to be careful. My grandmother was a tough lady. I remember her very specific, very interesting story, and definitely never forgotten. I was probably, 12, 13, just hanging out in the store. And then, someone came in. She was like, didn't feel like he was like buying antiques. He was just snooping around, and she like pulls out a very large weapon. I don't know if there were bullets in it, but she was intimidating. So that was something that stuck with me. But it was an amazing time. Brooklyn was, of course, a very different place back then, especially although Coney Island probably hasn't changed that much. This area certainly has changed. But yeah, so it was always new and interesting things. And also remember, God, back then, obviously no internet. Like his entire business was based on a full page Yellow Page ad, which was the big thing for the family. Oh, we got to buy the Yellow Page ad. And that's how people discovered him and how he was able to get people to call and say, hey, I have something to sell, come over. And yeah, it's amazing that's how, and also there was no GPS. He was like a master at understanding the streets. And he would go into all these people's homes and discover these beautiful objects and then resell them to other people.
Wow, that's crazy. It's how times have changed.
Yeah, but it was actually when he got older, I knew his business was going to be impacted. I mean, this is way later. And although eBay is not as active as it was, back when I was talking to him about getting online, eBay was hot, and it was the best way to sell this kind of stuff. So I just basically got him a Mac, taught him how to take a photo, put it online, and he did that till the day he passed away.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were a good son. You're patient with your parents, teaching them how to use technology, not getting frustrated.
Yeah. Well, I do have artists that I maintain, so
yeah.
I have to be, sensitive to all situations.
And so that was a seed of your interest in the arts. Mm-hmm. Tell us about how you discovered technology and new media.
Yeah. So, I have a master's in business from Pepperdine University, which was a very difficult place to go to school in Malibu. Oh my gosh. As a New Yorker, like driving up to this campus was ridiculous. Have any of you guys seen? Yeah. It's like on the beach in Malibu, and I was very fortunate to go there. I don't think I could have handled it as an undergraduate, but as a grad student, I was slightly more mature. And it was beautiful. So I learned more like business skills there. I think, being, with the antique store, I kind of learned a lot about that type of business, but I wanted to expand. So I went to grad school, have an MBA. And at that time, which was kind of late 90s, or no, like 96, web-based companies were just starting to emerge. And there were no agencies, like marketing, branding agencies, that truly understood this new breed of company that was starting to evolve. So I thought it would be interesting to start a company that was only devoted to .coms at the time, which again now seems very common, but back in 96, 97 was very unusual. So I started a company with a couple of folks called Digital Pulp, which was basically an agency that was devoted to only .coms. So we built the websites and also did all the branding and marketing, in addition to all the way from television to print to logos to brand identity.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about the beginning of Digital Pulp, because for a lot of us here in the room, a lot of us grew up with the internet.
Yeah.
And there's a very small percentage of us here in the room who can remember their first modem.
Yeah.
I think we're both a little bit older than some of the folks here. I remember getting the first 56K modem that had the little dial-up. I remember the AOL CDs. I don't know if folks remember that, but there was this thing called CDs back in the day.
Oh my
gosh. So, Digital Pulp was an agency that was helping people navigate the internet and figure out how to create ads on the internet.
Well, banner ads were one element of it, but we were actually building the presence of the next generation of companies, which were only online. So that means we had to have a tech team in-house that was building and coding, which was very unusual for an agency at the time. Like, we would compete against massive agencies that had hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. We had like 20, 30 people, and we would win the account because we had this expertise in-house. So I was a creative director, so I was able to work with both the tech folks who were doing the programming and the creatives who were doing the design, but not just the websites. We did traditional marketing and branding. So it was a full service agency, but our clients were this new breed at the time of these .coms. So it was a really special environment where I saw how technology and creatives were interacting, and that really was interesting to me.
So back then people needed websites the same way today people need TikTok.
Oh yeah. I mean,
I need a social media intern.
There was no social media at that time at all. Making, and also the websites were pretty rough back then.
Yeah.
The graphics weren't so great. But it was an amazing collaborative process that got me excited, and eventually also caused me to leave because I was getting kind of burnt out with having clients tell me what to do.
Yeah. After digital Pulp, what inspired you to shift your focus to the art world?
So, well, first I saw that the bubble, it was about to burst. I mean, I just, there was so many really bad ideas that people were spending money on. I mean, we were making that money, so it was fine. But I also saw that, like, there's no way this can continue. And we, at that point, grew to like 50 people. We had a gorgeous office, big outdoor roof deck. It was amazing. But I just sensed something was going to fail. And I resigned, not knowing what I was going to do, actually, which was a little bit frightening. But I did, like I said, have this connection to working with technology and creatives. And I was like, how can I do that without the constraints of clients telling me what to do? And then after doing some research, I was inspired by a bunch of shows that were actually happening at the Whitney Museum called Bitstreams, which was obviously a big influence on me. And there was another show in San Francisco called 010101. And I was like, are there any galleries like that are doing this and selling this kind of work and teaching people how to collect it? And there weren't any. So I decided to go for it around 2000.
That's awesome. What were some of the major hurdles for getting this type of gallery off the ground? I mean, today, almost every gallery is somewhat of a new media gallery. It's modern art today.
Not true.
That's
No, they have new media artists, but they're not
new media artists, rather.
But they're not
new media galleries.
No. There's still. I mean, I'm one of the few galleries in the world that are only focused on new media. It's pretty challenging.
So yeah, another way of saying it is, today, new media art has become much more mainstream.
Much more mainstream.
Whereas back in 2001,
it was very difficult.
You were the first.
Yeah. There was no one doing it, but I saw the potential. Again, these shows showed me that the art world was interested, that there was potential. So, I mean, opening a gallery in New York is challenging on its own. It's so hard to stay open in New York. I mean, there's amazing competition. Opening a gallery that's focused on something that people don't understand quite well is even more difficult. And the third problem, which was very sad, right before I opened, 9/11 happened.
Right.
So, I mean, this was all my money put into it. I had this amazing architect come in, build the space. I was in Chelsea at the time. And literally 2 months before I opened, the towers went down. So I was ready to open. And so it was very rough start. A combination, again, of doing something special and unique that the art world wasn't used to, and then having the city in this situation, which was, incredibly challenging. But the city bounced back pretty quickly. I knew, the one thing I may have learned from my MBA is you don't make money for the first 2 years anyway. So I knew anyway, I wasn't going to earn much money the first couple of years in the business. This just was a bit of a psychological hurdle, dealing with the city in that condition. And art wasn't really on the forefront of people's minds. But I definitely had an instinct that this would be something that would definitely integrate into the art world and become something that is more collectible and, something that people were really interested in living with.
That's awesome. It's so crazy to think about 9/11 and that context in the early 2000s.
Yeah, no, it was, I mean, life-changing, of course. In Chelsea, I would look down the street, I saw the towers, and it was really, really difficult time. But the city's incredible how they came back. It was really amazing.
So you were able to stay resilient through this time, keep the art gallery going. And at what point did you feel like you hit an inflection point with the gallery, and where was your first big break, if you will?
Well, it was a slow build. Again, opening any gallery is going to take a minute to get a reputation and form those type of relationships. I would say there were a handful of clients that were very excited about this kind of work, and they really wound up being incredible supporters. So they really helped the gallery get like that really quick boost forward, and gave us a lot more confidence. And once you start doing that, you tend to reach more people. They tell their friends, they feel more confident, and then they start coming to the shows. So I would say those first two big collectors that bought quite a bit of work that were focused on media art really helped us out and gave us much more confidence.
Just diving into some of the works that you've shown. You've worked with some of the biggest names in digital art. Are there any projects or exhibitions that sort of stand out in your mind as a career-defining moment for you, or one of the few career-defining moments for you?
There's a lot to think about there. I would say the one that actually is most recent, which some of you may have seen, which was a pretty major turning point, I think, in both the art world, the museum world, and even collectors, is Rafik Anadol. He's a Turkish-born artist who lives in Los Angeles. And he had a massive piece at MoCA around a year ago. I don't know if any of you saw that. And it was basically, he was commissioned to use AI to interpret the collection in real time. You can look it up, Rafik Anadol MoMA, and you'll see it was a massive, probably 40 by 40 foot LED screen in the lobby. And I know that's more recent, but it was something that got so much attention. I've never seen so much traction connected to an art exhibit in my 23 years. And we got so many phone calls, so many people came in just because of that show. And the MoMA probably got more attention. And there's one interesting statistic. The people that visited that piece sat in front of that work longer than any work that anyone has ever sat in front of at the MoMA, like consistently. It was over 30 minutes, which is highly unusual at a museum. I mean, usually like 3-4 minutes and you're like, next. This people just sat and stayed. So the museum, which is very important, because the museums, it kind of trickles down. When the museums embrace something, it hits culture and then collectors, and then it becomes successful and integrated. And this was probably one of the bigger moments in the 23 years that reached that many people at that level.
That's awesome. What are some of the most interesting ways you've seen artists use technology throughout the years? And I'm curious specifically because so much of making art is about creating something that's timeless. But with technology moves so fast that something as incredible as AI in a few years will just be commonplace.
Yep.
And so, we were joking earlier about the CDs and the CD player. That was a big deal back then. Yeah, right. No, now it's like we don't even have, it's all in the cloud. Like that's kind of crazy. So I'm curious, like, what are some of the most clever uses of technology that you've seen with you've seen artists use with technology, and how has that stood the test of time, especially as the technology has evolved?
The moment that my artists, and one of them is actually 86 years old, and he's like the OG of generative art. So when generative art started to become more popular, this was before NFTs, which I'm sure we'll get into. Generative really changed how someone experiences and lives and understands art, because generative art is never the same. So if you buy a piece of generative art, you are living with something that is in constant flux, constant motion, and potentially using real-time data, which is also affecting the piece. So when my artists started to get more involved with that, I saw that being something that was highly unusual and very unique to my program. I was one of the only galleries in the world that was selling software as art. And for a decent amount of money. Some of the pieces went for $100,000, $200,000. And they were basically buying code. And the crazy thing about that is the computer's going to die, the screen's going to die, but the software will live on. It just has to be emulated and recreated. So that, again, is if we could get into that, but that's a very big part of what my gallery does, is the preservation and migration of work, which is very different than a traditional gallery selling paintings and sculptures. But getting back to that 86-year-old Manfred Moore, it's very important for my gallery to have artists who are doing this experimenting with technology from much earlier generations, even much earlier than us. And he was writing software in the late 60s. Now, of course, the computers were bigger than this room, so it wasn't like you were putting it in your home. But his output at the time, the only thing he could do was plotter prints. So he would write the software, and then these old school XY plotters would make unique pieces out of that code, which was unbelievable for that time. Even the computers were massive. He gained access to these special places that let him work. And so that was kind of the beginning of generative, but people in the art world didn't even understand it, nor did they care. And they were very apprehensive about accepting it as art. And it took, decades for that to become credible and recognized.
That's awesome. So like AI, as we all know, is the topic du jour. How do you see AI affecting visual art in the next 3 to 5 years? I mean, right now, the most obvious applications are with, graphic design. We've seen a lot of movement with video. I'm curious, how you sort of see AI affecting the evolution of art, especially new media art.
Well, as I mentioned, that artist Rafik Anadol is probably the most famous artist in the world using AI. NVIDIA sponsors him, Google Labs. He was just showing at Davos. So it's clearly being integrated into the artists I work with, because a lot of them are eager to utilize the next generation of tools. So it's used in different ways. Some artists use it as an addition to their art practice. Some artists like Rafik use it completely, where it's completely, he actually creates his own algorithms versus using commercial ones. It's very tricky. I'm a little nervous about the future. Right now, I think it's amazing. It's really a special tool for artists. It does things faster and in ways that weren't possible years ago. But it is becoming challenging to maintain. And also the problem with AI is it is moving too quickly. I mean, if you think about Adobe Creative Suite and Adobe products, which were kind of the digital tools of the earlier generation, they were very purposeful in their versioning, in how they evolved. They let artists get good at something, and learn how to make really amazing things, and then move on to the next set of tools or the next version. AI is like, you got to be on this like every week, and that's too much stress, I think, for an artist. So like I said, it's tricky. I think it's brilliant, but it also, I'm a little concerned about the pace at which it's moving.
Yeah, I'm a musician, so I think about this from the perspective of music. Oftentimes, I spend hours, days, months, years writing a song that can now just be generated by a 13-year-old, on his iPhone in between TikTok, sessions. And, obviously right now it's not there yet, but it will be soon.
Yeah,
and
totally.
On the one hand, I think the positive spin on all of this is it lowers the barrier to creativity such that you democratize making something that otherwise would be very difficult to make. Personally, I've spent a couple of decades now, learning music production, learning things like Ableton and Pro Tools, and taking voice lessons. Now with technology, with AI, there's an app called BandLab. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with it, but you can literally just pull an AI beat, sing into your AirPods, use a little AI filter that tunes your voice, and it sounds pretty good. And so there's a part of me that's like, the diehard musician in me is like, oh, that's not music, it's got to be earned. And then the other part of me is like, that's actually kind of cool that like my 11-year-old niece who hasn't been practicing her piano can all of a sudden make a potential hit song.
I don't know. I'm not sure how cool that is, but we're
from another generation, my friend.
But we have to deal with it. No, but I'm also tapped into technology much more than most people, especially on the creative side. And I do respect that ease of use. I have a daughter who's 21, who's about to graduate Bard, and she's a film major. And film is like music, man. Like, they're making the sets, they're doing the stuff, actors are being replaced. Like, it was kind of nice. In fact, this last week or two, if you guys were in Lower East Side, they were filming a real serious film, and they transformed Orchard Street into like 1920s New York. Like, it was totally old school filming, and it was so nice to see.
How refreshing.
No, it really was beautiful to see a physical film set like that, because so many people are not going to be doing it anymore. So, yeah, I think right now, like you said, I think it's really beautiful as a creative partner. I think it can do some amazing things. I'm hoping that, again, there's still a level of craft and humanity that's connected to it, because that's what makes me a little nervous.
So some would argue that the craft and the humanity comes in the prompting of the AI, right? The guiding of it. Like, not all AI art is created equal. It really takes. Sure. It is an art, or some would call it prompt engineering, if you will.
Yes.
But there is something to someone who's really good with having a dialogue with the AI to get the painting to look just weird enough.
Yeah. No, and I took my artists do that, and not. I mean, they're probably doing more custom stuff than that, but many of them are using it as a really amazing creative partner, and it's more what the future holds. That's what I'm concerned, because it needs to just pace itself in a way that we can all, again, learn and catch up, and not be having to deal with new versioning and new apps every week. I think that's, again, those are my concerns, but I absolutely think creatively things are going to accelerate at a pretty rapid pace.
Yeah. The other analogy I have for it is like, art is both creativity plus skill. And so, for example, let's say you're a pianist. Or let's say you're a musician, an artist who writes music, but using the piano as your tool. You have a level of creativity, but you also need to develop a level of skill in order to fully express the ideas in your head. Mm-hmm. And so with technology, we're moving to this place where you don't need that skill to get to somewhat of the same result. And on some level, it unlocks that creativity amongst such a larger group of people who, for whatever reason, maybe they weren't fortunate enough to be born into a family that paid for piano lessons or whatever, right? And so on some level, there's more purity in that scenario where someone can just make something on the merit of their own imagination.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's going to be some benefits. They will broaden the creative capabilities of many, many more people. But I'm coming from a couple of different generations of creativity, so I'm thinking about, again, the physicality, the practice of, learning that skill, and not having such such I guess, an easy boost in a way.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, time will tell. I'm just saying it's moving at a rapid pace, and I'm hoping that it'll slow down a bit.
Yeah. Um, I'm curious, we've been talking about AI, we've been talking about how technology has changed over time. How has the role of the gallerist changed over time as well with all of these emerging technologies?
Sure. Well, the NFT movement was a bit concerning for the gallery when it happened, because, I mean, first of all, again, came on really fast, very aggressive, and it was a completely new audience that was not in the art world. I mean, this was a new community that, because of the type of gallery that I have, I needed to understand what was happening, and I needed to connect with them, and I needed to be knowledgeable about what was happening. I actually wound up hiring a consultant just to keep us on track and knowledgeable about what was happening, because it was too much information, really. So NFTs really shifted the potential power towards the artist for a minute.
A very hot minute.
Yeah, which was nice. I mean, although majority of the work wasn't really art, in my opinion, but it was an interesting movement and a way, obviously, to monetize these digital assets. But what it did also is it made my gallery almost more important as a place to show the history of this work and to show how it really should be presented. And you shouldn't be looking at, a $1 million piece on your iPhone. And it should be something that affects you in a way that's beyond that, flipping mentality. And that was a really difficult moment, I think, for the art world and for my gallery to just really figure out how to survive in this new world of what they thought was digital art. Like, I'm friendly with Beeple now, who really stirred up the art world when he sold the $69 million JPEG. Mm-hmm. And, when you reach those numbers, the art world's going to start to pay attention. And it was insane. He had never really sold artwork prior to that. And to go from almost nothing to 69 million is a bit much to manage. Just as an art gallery, like, to understand the concept and the logic behind that. But what it did do is create a new audience for the gallery that not all of them became collectors, of course, but I did gain a certain percentage of these people who did want to go deeper, who didn't want to just have a JPEG, who wanted to know how artists were using technology to create work. So I wound up finding and becoming close with a much wider group of people than I anticipated in the beginning. Because a lot of my artists were very against NFTs for numerous reasons. One was, early on, I don't know if it's still an issue, was energy-wise, there were problems with it. Environmentally, there were issues. And a lot of my artists didn't want to get involved with that. There was no conceptual rigor behind the work. It was about this, how good is my social media account? How many people am I reaching? It was too much of that for the artists that I work with. They didn't want to get involved with that side of it. So now I think that it's crashed a bit. It's filtered down to a lot of more interesting projects. So we've done some things that are in that the NFT genre, but we have much more control now of what that is. And I do believe in the blockchain for sure. I think the concept of having a certification of a digital asset on the blockchain is a great idea. But the problem is, most of the artwork that is substantial can't even fit on the blockchain. It can't reside on the blockchain. You're just linking to that piece. So it's not even on chain. So that's a lot of people didn't understand that. The pieces that we're selling, that we're flipping quickly, were on chain because they were JPEGs and they were very small files and they were almost like, trading cards. And it was very easy for people to do financial transactions.
Yeah, like this generative art piece, like that you mentioned.
No way.
Couldn't be on chain.
Yeah, no, it's like, many gigabytes of data, and it also wouldn't be able to function. There are things now that are on chain that are very lightweight, that can work, that are more vector based. But the majority of work that I sell can't be on chain. The certification can be on chain with a link to the actual work that has to be downloaded. But it was more about how the work is presented is, to me, an essential part of how an artwork is experienced and understood. And that's something that was lost during that moment. And so I'm glad, it's kind of the artists now that have been successful, the ones that are still around, like Rafiq and Beeple and some others, are now looking to me and others to work with in a physical space, because they want to be connected to a wider art world. They want to be able to do a large projection or make a physical object. I mean, I would say 30-40% of the work that we sell in the gallery is physical. It's not plugged in. It just has a relationship to that moving image.
That's awesome. Something that you were talking about earlier was the role of social media in pumping up valuations. Yeah. Like, how do you see the role of social media in art today? How do you see it moving forward?
Well, again, during the NFT moment, there were so many different, Discord being one that was just kind of annoying and frustrating to deal with, because there's only so many areas of social media when we want to get involved with. It's all time. I can't just hire all these people to work on different types of social media. So back then it was much more aggressive. I remember Clubhouse was a big thing. Yeah. Which disappeared. I don't know. Does it still exist anymore? Does Clubhouse still exist?
I think it might have turned into Twitter Spaces
for a minute. Yeah, so Twitter Spaces kind of became that, I guess. I would say Instagram is still the most used social that we work with. Twitter is a little more NFT focused, that community, and they're still into Discord a little bit.
What about TikTok?
We don't get so involved with TikTok, but some of the younger artists we work with too. Yeah.
Looking back on your career, I'm curious, for the creatives in the room, what's some of the best advice that you've been given throughout your career that you've seen work for both yourself, for other artists, and what advice would you give to folks who are looking to blend art and leverage the latest technologies, looking to blend art with the latest technologies?
Well, it kind of depends on what route that person wants to take, because if you want to enter the fine art world, it's very different than entering the commercial art world. Like if you're a designer or you're working for a brand, or that's a completely different. It's kind of what I did prior. So I've kind of combined both worlds. The art world, which I've been mostly involved with the past 23 years, it's about, understanding history, knowing what's out there, and trying to come up with a creative spin on that. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to be completely original in the world we live in today. But you can look at things that were done previously and make them a little different, make them your own. So I think that's good advice, because you don't want to feel that pressure of having complete originality. I think that's very, very challenging. So it is important to be unique. It is important, again, in my opinion, to have a craft, and presentation, at least in my world, is really important, to take note of that. And sometimes, again, the younger artists forget that that's essential to the experience, and they may just throw it on screen or throw it up online. But it can sometimes go much further when you look at how something physical can enhance that. So I think that type of advice would definitely help someone at least get noticed in the art world.
I love that. Understand your history.
Yeah.
Put your own spin on it.
Yeah.
And don't forget about presentation. Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. We have time for a little Q&A.
Of course. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, we're going to open up to Q&A. I'm going to pass this mic around. Just go ahead and raise your hand and just speak directly into the mic. And then what we'll do after Q&A is we'll take a short 10-minute break and we'll all meet downstairs in the basement for an amazing musical performance by Daniela Faith. If you haven't been in the basement yet, you're in for a treat. Like I said earlier, this is not just a recording studio. This doubles as our occasional underground nightclub. So we're looking forward to hosting you all down there. All right. So who's got the first question for Steven here? Yes. Can we pass this back there?
Hi, my name is Emmanuel. I have a very simple question. You talked about the antique shop. Was there any particular piece at the antique shop that really captured your imagination as a kid?
Great question. What was your favorite toy?
Well, I was just going to say there was a toy that frightened me that I have in my apartment right now because I inherited it from my dad. It was this scary monkey that would,
Oh my gosh.
do with the teeth, and it was frightening. And it would just go off at weird times, and so that wasn't like the best art thing, but it did come. It was an old toy that left an impression on me. But no, I actually have quite a few things from my dad in my home, and yeah, there's no one thing other than the scary monkey that I remember as super specific.
So thank you so much. I'm Amanda. I work for IBM. So coming from a technology, and I actually do digital media partnerships. So we should talk about that after this. Yeah. But when you look at AI, one of the easiest ways for us to understand it is the movement of application development from composition to compiling. And so with art, like what you were talking about with music, you're compiling like the beat to the lyrics, and then the AI is helping you with the outcome versus having to compose it yourself, which I think is so cool. But can you help us understand, with all these new AI and generative AI technologies, have you seen more artists adopt this medium? And then how efficient do you have to be in Adobe or these tools to get started as a digital artist?
Let's see. Well, one of my artists was actually the first artist in residency at OpenAI. So a lot of the companies are embracing, and NVIDIA, of course, with Rafiq. So there is a lot of support actually from tech companies that are helping artists. And in terms of like what artists, like the skill set to me depends on what the intention of the artwork is. So the Adobe Creative Suite, of course, is always utilized. I mean, because there are so many different softwares, but it just depends on what the end result is. If it's a generative work that's completely computational, you have to learn a certain type of code. Although, again, this is the thing that's happening right now with that artist who did an artist in residency at OpenAI. He's training his AI to write generative code. So AI will actually be writing his code in some cases. I think each artist has to tap into the technology that makes sense for their concept. And some of my artists are doing a lot of, again, physical work that has some either conceptual or physical relationship to whether it's media culture, how technology is impacting society. So I know it's not a very specific answer, but I think it's very it's determined by the specific agenda of the artist. But the other thing which is cool, which I've been doing, which kind of merged my digital pulp and my current Bitforms gallery business, is a lot of brands are very interested in working with my artists in very pure ways. Cartier, Bulgari, Audemars Piguet. I'm doing Art Basel in Miami, and Infinity, the car company, just commissioned an artist to do something during the art fair. LG is commissioning one of my artists to do something in Istanbul this week. So that's the other thing that I'm seeing, which is kind of neat, that the companies are connecting with, say, designers or advertising agencies. They're working with artists who have a little bit more of a pure creative intentions than, say, a designer would. So that's something that's becoming more popular with my business as well.
Can you speak to a little bit to the experiential element of digital art versus?
Yeah, actually, I was at a panel right before this at Art Tech House, which is in Chelsea, and they specialize in immersive experiential work. I think there's a lot of really, really bad experiential works. I mean, the whole Van Gogh thing was not a good thing for anybody except maybe a little kids or something. I don't know. To me, like that was a pretty serious abuse of one of the most famous artists who's ever lived. And it was all public domain. So it was a very easy business way in. They just hired a bunch of motion graphics designers, took images and charged $50 a ticket. And I think that was a bit sad for me. But places like Art Tech House and some other places, I'm starting to see create more interesting immersive experiences. A lot of my artists actually do that. My gallery, which is on Allen Street, which you guys should all come visit, is not very large, so I can't do these really immersive pieces, but we try to show representations of them. But it's absolutely been trending in the last 5 to 7 years towards larger scale, immersive, ticketed installations that we're seeing pop up around the world.
Yep. Hey, Stephen. I know you can't see me behind the column, but we talked earlier. My name is Yu Shao. I'd love to get your opinion on this. You know, as AI continues to evolve and learn and one day encompasses all of human knowledge and experience, do you think that there is a world where AI is the greatest artist on the planet? And if not, why is that?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I was alluding to earlier, is that I'm concerned about the future and it being the greatest artist ever. But I'm really hoping it's not the case. I think the human interaction, the qualities of human nature, I'm hoping will still impact whatever AI is developed in the future. But as you said, it will become all-encompassing, all knowledgeable. You know, there's no way one person will ever be as smart as AI. It's just not possible. But again, human beings have certain attributes that I'm hoping AI doesn't, become. Like basically more like thinking like a human does and having sensitivity and feelings, but that's what they're moving towards. So I don't know. I don't like answering this question. It makes me upset. It makes me sad.
Hi, my name is Javier, and I'm a photographer. And I want to ask you if you ever had experience of feel burnout of what you do, and if you have been burned out, how do you manage to get out from it?
Well, the previous business I had, I definitely kind of felt burnt out, and also that that particular industry was changing in a way I wasn't excited about. And then I just took a break. I looked at what I loved in my previous job, which was this collaboration between artists, creatives, and technologists. And I sat on that for a minute, actually for like a year. And then I was inspired by these shows, and that made me develop this current business. Right now, I have to say, because of things like AI and NFTs and the continual evolution of technology, it's very hard to get bored in my line of work, which is exciting. It's always interesting, always changing. It's challenging, but so far I'm not burnt out. And I think as things develop, I don't think I'll ever be burnt out. I'm definitely a little tired, and I travel a lot. But other than that, I'm very inspired, and I'm lucky that I'm in a field that is not static. It's always changing and evolving.
Last question from me. What do you have coming up that we should all check out?
Well, all of you should definitely see my current show, Rafael Lozano-Hemmer. He's actually done a combination of these large-scale immersive pieces. He did a massive project in Abu Dhabi, in museums all around the world. He has a huge piece in Sag Harbor right now at the Parish Museum on the exterior. So he's at my gallery, so you can visit that anytime that we're open, Tuesday through Saturday. And it's at 131 Allen Street. I'm doing an art fair in Istanbul this coming week. And then the other big thing, which you guys, if you haven't been to, is kind of fun, is Art Basel in Miami. So we also do that, and that happens early December. And that's really amazing. It's a little overwhelming. There's many art fairs, but it's very exciting. It's a great place to socialize, meet people, and see just thousands of artworks in one place.
Thank you, Steven. Really appreciate it.